Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means ever wonder why you choose one thing over another. This study dives deep into how our attention, even when we're not looking directly at something, massively shapes the choices we make. It challenges the idea that we only pay attention to what we're staring at. So, we make decisions all the time, right? What to eat, what to buy, what to watch. And it is pretty obvious that what we decide to look at influences our choices. If you are choosing between two snacks and you stare at one for longer, you might be more likely to pick it. Previous research has shown this pretty clearly. But here is a twist. Scientists have known for a long time that we can also pay attention to things without actually looking at them. This is called covert attention. Think about driving a car. You are looking straight ahead, but you are also aware of what is happening in your side mirrors or out of the corner of your eye. This covert attention could be crucial for how we make decisions, especially when there are multiple options. The problem was that it was really hard to measure this covert attention directly during a decision. Making task. Most studies relied on eye tracking, which only tells us where someone is looking overtly. Some models even assume that things we're not looking at are just less important, with a fixed amount of downweighting. But that felt too simple, too rigid. That is where this research comes in. The scientists wanted to figure out if covert attention actually matters for our choices, and how it is controlled. They developed a clever experiment to directly measure covert attention while people made choices between different options, and then see how that impacted their final decisions. Here is how they set up their experiment. Imagine you are presented with a few different options, like maybe different colored patches filled with dots. Your job is to pick the patch that has the most dots of a specific target color to earn a reward. This is a value-based decision. Now, to measure covert attention, they use something called an attentional probe. At random points during your decision process, a small letter would flash briefly at the location of each patch, whether you were looking at it or not. Afterward, you'd be asked to recall what those letters were. Your ability to correctly identify the letter at a specific location told them how much attention you were paying to that location. Even if your eyes were elsewhere, they did this in two main experiments, one with 2 choices and one with 3. And they played around with whether the options were hidden or visible when you weren't looking at them. What did they find? It is pretty fascinating. They discovered that covert attention isn't just randomly spread out. It is actively shaped by factors that are important for making a decision. First, they found that covert attention was really sensitive to the value of the options. If an option that you weren't looking at had a higher value, you were more likely to correctly detect the probe letter shown there. This means your mind was actively sending attention to that valuable, but unfixed option. Interestingly, this increased covert attention to a high-value peripheral option came at a cost. When attention was being directed to these unseen, valuable options, attention to the option you were actually looking at tended to decrease. It's like attention has to be shared, and a valuable but unseen option can pull attention away from what you are currently focused on. They also found that choice relevance mattered. If an option was actually part of the choice you had to make, you paid more attention to it covertly compared to an option that was just there. But irrelevant to your decision, this shows that our brains are prioritizing information that directly impacts our choices. But this is where it gets really impactful. They didn't just find that covert attention is shaped by decisions. They found that it actually affects the choices people make. You know how sometimes you are about to make a choice and you look at one option, then another, and then you tend to pick the very last one you looked at. That is called a last fixation bias. This study found that if people covertly paid attention to another option, this last fixation bias was reduced. It was like their covert attention was balancing out the influence of their last overt gaze. They looked at another bias called time advantage. This is where if you spend a lot of time fixating on one option, you are more likely to choose it, even if its value is similar to another option. Again, they found that when people covertly paid attention to alternative options, this time advantage bias was also weakened. A crucial point was that they figured out this covert attention wasn't just people getting ready to look at something next. They showed that even when an option wasn't the one someone was about to succumb to, they were still paying attention to it based on its value. This means covert attention is a distinct process from simply preparing to move your eyes. So, what does all this mean for us? This research is a big deal because it shows that our decisions are influenced by much more than just where our eyes are pointed. Covert attention, that silent processing of information we're not directly fixating on, plays a vital role. Our brains aren't just passively taking in information. They're actively directing attention, both openly and covertly based on what matters most for our goals. Think about it. When you are choosing between jobs or apartments or even what to order for dinner, you are not just looking at one thing, you are scanning, considering options, and your mind is processing those options even when your gaze is elsewhere. This study provides strong evidence that this covert consideration actually influences your final choice, helping to reduce biases that might come from simply fixating on something for a while. This challenges older models of decision-making that assumed attention was either just gaze or a simple static downweighting of other options. Instead, attention is dynamic, flexible, and responsive to value and relevance. It's like a spotlight that can shift and expand beyond what our eyes are seeing. The researchers acknowledge a limitation though. Since they use the probe task, which is a bit of a dual task, they can't completely rule out that working memory also played a role. Future studies could use brain imaging techniques to get a clearer picture of the neural basis of this covert attention. But the core message is powerful. Covert attention isn't just a passive bystander. It is an active participant in our decision-making process. It helps us explore alternatives, gather information we might otherwise miss, and ultimately leads to more balanced, less biased choices. It means we should be conscious of how our attention, both overt and covert, shapes our everyday decisions. So next time you are faced with a choice, remember that your mind is working overtime, even on things you are not looking at. It's a fascinating insight into the hidden workings of our minds. If you found this breakdown interesting, give us a like, comment below with your thoughts on covert attention, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology. We love hearing from you, so let us know what research you'd like us to cover next. Thanks for watching.